President Cyril Ramaphosa has denied that he failed to appoint the SABC Board, responding to Media Monitoring Africa's urgent court application, which seeks to declare his conduct unlawful and unconstitutional for failing to appoint the board. Ramaphosa said the delay is due to unlawful decisions by Parliament's Portfolio Committee, and he had to refer the matter back to the National Assembly. A letter by Parliament's Communications Portfolio Committee Chair Boyce Maneli to the National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula reveals that former Communications Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni questioned the selection of former SABC head of news Phathiswa Magopeni's candidacy, suggesting that it went against corporate governance prescripts. Now, the letter is among the documents Ramaphosa submitted to the Constitutional Court with his answering affidavit to Media Monitoring Africa. The head of programs at Media Monitoring Africa, Thandi Smith, joins us to discuss this issue. Thandi, thank you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks. Good morning to you and the viewers.
All right, so let's summarize this, because as I said in the introduction, the President has responded to your papers on the SABC court action filed with the Constitutional Court. So give us a summary of the three reasons given for the delays in the appointment of the board in the court papers, including the objections raised about some of the selected names and the legal validity of the reserves as questioned by Ramaphosa.
Well, some of the key issues that he has raised about the process is that there were more names given than what he needs to appoint. There were three reserve names, and he's questioning that process. He's questioning the decision-making of the Portfolio Committee in providing additional names over and above the 12 names. And that seems to be one of the key arguments here, is that he's questioning the legality of the entire process, from the Portfolio Committee to National Assembly, referring the names to his office. And that seems to be sort of the focus of the argument. And he's denying that he has done anything to deliberately delay the appointments of the board. But what we have seen come out is that there are additional concerns and additional questions around ministerial interference in questioning names being put forward by National Assembly. And so that seems to be the key argument here, coming from the president, which you know, given the process, given the history, given the fact that we 5 months on Wednesday, we'll be 5 months without a board at the SABC. This raises more questions than it does answers. There are still issues about transparency. There are still issues about the president not giving valid reasons. The correspondence that we have seen between his office and National Assembly or the Speaker just does not make sense.
Yeah. So let us understand this. So obviously the issue of the amount of names, you've mentioned this. I mean, three more names. So wrongly, he advised wrongly that 15 names will be submitted for him to pick the 12 he prefers to appoint, which gives him discretionary power that the Act does not entitle him to. This is what he has said. He also says he cannot approve that because the National Assembly has exceeded its statutory powers, and that's basically the main reason, or one of the main reasons. What is your reaction to the president's response? Does this hold weight?
Well, no, it doesn't. And purely because what we did see in terms of correspondence and communication between National Assembly and the President, or the Portfolio Committee and the President, is that when he did initially question the additional three names, what we saw was a response going, okay, fair enough, ignore the three names, appoint the 12. And he still questioned. He didn't respond adequately to that request. So he then said, no, we're not going to appoint the 12 because there are additional three names, even though he was told or instructed to by National Assembly to appoint the 12. And he's now challenging that process. So it's still, as I said, there's still issues of transparency here, because, as you say, he does not have discretionary powers to choose what names get selected and get appointed. But that's not what we saw coming out. Yes, initially there were additional 3 names as reserve. That is to say, if there was an issue with the appointment of either of the 12 members, the reasoning or the justification behind it was so that there were additional 3 so one of those could be inserted into the 12 so that the process could get finalized. And that is where he feels that there was discretionary powers, which he does not have. But then we see this communication saying, okay, fair enough, ignore the additional 3, just appoint the 12, and we'll deal with the consequences after the fact. Or we'll decide if there needs to be a process or if there are any issues. But the bottom line is that we need to appoint the 12 members of the board. And this issue came out in February. We're now in the middle of March. And so, yes, again, it's there do seem to be delay tactics that aren't coming out in this. But we do see the communication by the previous Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. I think we need to make that point. But and so, that raises more questions than not. Whose agenda is this serving? Who gets to benefit from all these delays?
I want to ask you one. I think one of the glaring questions here, and quite important, is the response from the Communications Portfolio Committee. The name of the former Communications Minister, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, came up. And what is being said is that she wrote to Parliament's Portfolio Committee, which brought up the prescripts of the King 4 report in regard to former news head Phathiswa Magopeni, who is on the list of the candidates recommended by Parliament, who has worked at the SABC and, basically heading up the news at the SABC. We know the story with Phathiswa, and she is no longer here, but, there was an investigation into it, and there was a lot around this, to which the chair of the committee said that the SABC board appointments are governed by the Broadcasting Act governs. Has this any legal standing whatsoever in this matter?
It doesn't seem like it. There are other members of the board other members of the suggested board, the referred board, who have worked at the SABC. So why in particular is Phathiswa's name being questioned by the former minister when there are other members of the names that have been put forward that have worked at the SABC? So, not only that, if there were issues, both the minister and the president are completely throwing the parliamentary process under the bus, and suggesting that they don't know how to follow due process. And there doesn't seem to be legal standing around this. It's clear ministerial interference, it's clear political interference, and the former minister needs to be held accountable for that.
And this is the problem, because what we are reading into this is political interference, and this is something that is frowned upon, and one that was tried to be rectified in our previous board that was here at the SABC, and now it just looks like there's a lot of interference happening, and one can only assume that is the problem, especially when you're sitting without a board for 5 months ahead of an election. And we're hearing, and I'm just reading an interview or it was in a podcast that was done with Eusebius Makaiser and one of the former board's members, Michael Markovitz, basically claiming that there are 30 business plans waiting for board approval here at the SABC. And these processes have to be done before the end of the financial year. And the financial year is the end of this month here at the SABC. And at this point, there's just no board in sight, and the delaying is even more and more. The repercussions of not having a board, let's talk about that.
Well, no strategic governance can take place. And not only do we not have a board, there seems to be confusion around who is the accounting authority while there's no board in place. So there's literally no strategic direction and appropriate governance over the SABC as we speak. And as you rightly said, this is months before one of our most contested elections that are going to be held. There's political interference, clear political interference in the process. And, it's a deliberate crisis. What seems to be taking place is a very strategic attempt in creating a crisis at the public broadcaster. And, ahead of an election period, especially, speaks volumes. But, we know that the SABC is already in a financial crisis. We know that the SABC has governance issues that need to be dealt with. And deliberately not having a board in place is simply going to have a detrimental impact on the governance and stability of the organization. And that's simply unacceptable.
Yeah. I mean, if we look back at this process from the very, very beginning, the fact of the matter is that we know that the term of the board ended on the 15th of October. That was last year. I think there was only a look for candidates in around about July. Interviews only happened in September. And then the board, it ended and there was still nothing. Their term ended and there was still nothing. I mean, one could have seen from the very beginning that there was a very flawed process leading up to the appointment of this new board. And one has to ask very, very hard questions as to why this was the case. What led to the delays from the beginning? Because there's been delay after delay after the delay. And here we sit 5 months later and still no board. What do you believe is at the heart of all of this as Media Monitoring Africa?
Well, that's exactly why we've submitted the urgent application to the Constitutional Court, and that's to get answers about the process. Because, initially, when there were a few delays in the beginning, you sort of started asking questions, but it could have been put down to process. It could have been put down to the portfolio committee not exactly doing what they were supposed to in the timeframes that they were supposed to. But the further we went along with continued delays, you started asking questions about where exactly is this coming from? Where is the push for the delay? Why are we sitting, in November, December, without having the board being finalized? And now 3 months later, we start getting a sort of a tiny picture, a tiny snippet of what could be the issues. And it speaks massively of political interference in deciding who needs to sit on the board of the SABC, which, the process is supposed to be public and transparent. The public are supposed to be able to put pressure and question the process at the time of the process. Why did the former minister not do it, when there was time for questions or issues to be raised? Why was there a letter sent back questioning the appointment of Phathiswa or the recommendation of Phathiswa? Why was this not raised in the the public participatory process, where Media Monitoring Africa, SOS, Support Public Broadcasting Coalition raised concerns or raised questions about what was happening? And so, yes, again, speaks massively of political interference, and even more so because, like we said earlier, at the time leading up to the elections. And so, again, it's unbelievably disappointing that, again, we are sitting with the same issues of deliberate political interference of the SABC. Yeah. And the former minister needs to be taken to task, needs to be sanctioned about these decisions.
Yeah, when we look at the actual act, I mean, you talk about the former minister. The act clearly outlines the process from Parliament's role until it makes recommendations of the names of the selected candidates to the President for appointment. I suppose you've already answered this question, but let me ask it again. Is it the minister's place to ask the committee?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
She can, like I said, she can raise concerns in the public participatory process. It's a process that the portfolio committee undertakes to recommend names to the National Assembly. National Assembly approves the names and puts the list forward for the President to appoint. That's the process. It's not very complicated.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, more questions have been raised than answers. And so we will be, responding with our replying affidavit this week. And we really, hope that through this process with the Constitutional Court, we will eventually get to the point of the board being appointed, or at least the actual answers being brought to light about what is going on with this process.
Even though the president has said that he hasn't acted inappropriately and he doesn't believe that your application should be urgent and the intervention of the court is not necessary at this stage. Again, your response to that?
Yeah, we disagree. We wouldn't have approached the Constitutional Court with an urgent application if we didn't really believe that it was absolutely necessary. And so, I don't think we were surprised in the response by the president in where they argue that it's not appropriate, because, the president clearly believes that what he has done has been appropriate. But we completely disagree with that. And so we will be continuing with our challenge.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. We'll keep on watching this one, but certainly, going on for 6 months without a board here at the SABC and all of the issues that are going on behind the scenes. And that, of course, was the head of programs at Media Monitoring Africa, Thandi Smith, talking to us about those ongoing failures by the president to appoint the SABC and also the issues surrounding the Constitutional Court.